This is the pre-production diary for the Knock Knock podcast. My name is Jason B. Jones. Diary entry 05. Over the past couple years, I've volunteered for an organization called the Encounter Training. I went through the Encounter Training in November of 2015, and it was life-changing for me. My wife had gone through it the previous July, and man, it's just been an amazing journey for us to learn all of these, healthy tools for communication through this training. And once I started volunteering behind the scenes in sort of a leadership perspective, one of the things I thought of and addressed was, man, we need a video that accurately captures this amazing program that I've been a part of. And so I immediately reached out to one of the best storytellers I know, my friend Jason Adams. Jason has been a freelance director. He shared with me coming up on 10 years, which is, if you've ever owned your own creative company, you know that is a huge accomplishment. He has done videos over the past 10 years for all sorts of companies and organizations and musicians, and has been nominated for Emmy Awards. He's just fantastic. And so we started making this video for the Encounter Training, and in the downtime of any shoot, you just start chatting, and I kind of walk him through this idea for the podcast, and he said, what would be amazing? He thought, what if we make a movie trailer for a podcast? It was like, I don't think that's ever been done, and I think it could be really impactful for getting people on board and, connecting people early with the story. And I thought, man, what an amazing idea. And so Jason and I got together and put this together. We traveled, we experienced some crazy stuff that we'll talk about here momentarily in the interview. But I wanted to bring him on and have him walk you through a little bit of his thinking. And he's just a really interesting guy. He's a creative mentor for me, and I'm happy that I'm going to get a chance to talk with him and share his words with you. Well, Jason, thanks so much for sitting down.
Yeah,
love having you in Nashville. It's pretty cool.
It worked out good. We had a music video gig thing this week, so we got to catch up a little bit. So it was good.
The weekends is when you get to hang. You got to work during the week so you can do what you love on the weekends, huh?
Absolutely.
Well, Jason, I'm so glad that I talked in the last episode about how both having the name Jason has been problematic because we just, when someone yells Jason, we just both turn around.
Yeah, actually, I just got an email from an artist who had seen the trailer. I haven't even told you this yet. And it had the note in it, "So sorry about your grandmother."
To you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not the podcast Jason. I'm the movie Jason.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a little bit confusing, but what marvelous taste our parents had.
I guess so.
Yes.
Or it was just like maybe the name came with us.
It's every kid from the 80s.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hey, man, one, I can't thank you enough. I think it's been amazing having you a part of what we're doing here because I just value you as a storyteller. Just before we started rolling, we were talking a little bit about stories that are close to us, and it's hard to be objective when you're trying to tell it because there's so much nuance, it's so emotionally charged that it's been very valuable to have you a part of it because you can be able to tell it in a different way. Yeah,
it was, I can't remember what we were working on, like another project together, I think when you first mentioned, not even the podcast goal, but just kind of shared your story about, being a young person and kind of, I think that age of like around 10, like my daughter's 12, and I think she still has really not experienced death, yet. Like we've had maybe I think only one family member kind of passed. So it's in that kind of pivotal age. And I think, I don't remember how we got to talking about it, but, your first introduction as a child to a major kind of death in the family was such a tragic one. And, I think a lot of young people learn how to deal with death. I think very, very few people learn how to deal with murder.
Yeah.
So, like that, I think we kind of got into that kind of conversation because, I don't know, I just kind of ask questions for a living because most of my stuff is documentary in nature. So I'm just fascinated with the story.
So what kind of drew you to it? I know that, we have a friendship that precedes working on this together. And I remember unpacking that for you because it's been rattling around in my head for a while. And it was spurred on by other podcasts of a similar nature by third parties, third parties jumping into a story and trying to dissect it and tell it. And, as we talked about it felt like it would be a powerful and healing journey, at least for me, selfishly for me, it would be healing to go through that story and to talk about it and talk about how it affected me, how it affected our family, and ultimately the city of Starkville. But what drew you to the story as a filmmaker and a storyteller?
I think what drew me in, any sense of injustice is usually enough of a pivotal point in story structure to really drive a narrative. Like all story needs conflict, and the primary conflict of this is that this is still unsolved. But the layers of that begin to get, just deeper and deeper was one is that, like, it was your personal story and you were the guy that wanted to kind of tell it, and you're still looking for some answers and some closure. And so it's an interesting story, but knowing that it's your story and it's part of something you experienced when you were younger, that was really fascinating to me because I had not really experienced a lot of true crime podcasts, and I only listened to one like at your recommendation after we kind of started talking about this.
Right.
And so they're all really cool, but not all of them are personal. And so I think that's what really drew me into this was that there is this injustice, but it's something that affected you very, very personally. And, as we've, been on these other projects for, the music business and stuff, and we'll get to talking on set or whatever, I kind of see the reflections or the thread of how this story kind of helped shape you as an artist and a person. And it's interesting. You don't always get to travel back and be part of a moment of someone's kind of origin story. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I feel like, we were, I guess the best way to put it, we were friendly when we worked together. But I feel like what really solidified our friendship was the trip to Starkville that we made together, where we did a lot of the shooting for the video trailer. For any of those that haven't seen it that might be listening, you can see that when you go to knockknockpodcast.com. That's sort of the feature trailer there. And there was a lot of intentionality about making that to being the jumping off point to gauge interest. But I would just love to hear from your side what that experience in Starkville was like for you.
It was really interesting to me because I had never gotten a call to, film trailers are common, but they're common to promote films. I had never gotten a call to use film as a promotional medium for another storytelling medium. And that was really an interesting idea, is how do we cram in enough about the podcast that you're going to be telling here over the next year? How do we shoot that in 4 or 5 days and put enough of the story in so that people know what we're after? And the only way to do that was to hit the road and go to all these places. And so to be able to literally be in the car with you the first time that you were back in Starkville since the murders and since the funeral, to be with you when we found out who owned the house that it happened in, and walking through the door of that house to see the room. And there was just all these incredible moments of seeing the house that was largely untouched. from the time, it was almost 30 years now, but it's a lovely little house, but it still retains a lot of its original kind of features and decorations. So there's parts of this that have just felt like a time capsule that's not been opened. And so it was fascinating for me to be able to kind of point the camera at that and just kind of go on that journey that, like you said, I think we were friendly, work colleagues from other projects. But if you ever want to find out how to become really fast friends, go investigate a murder together.
Right. Yeah. I remember being in that house. In my day job, my goal is always to capture other people's moments, and it was scary and shocking at how heavy that house was to me, and how ordinary it was to you. Yeah. I thought that was a really interesting dichotomy there. Mm-hmm. And I remember just breaking down. I had to take a moment, and I broke down there because there was just this. It was real. The story since I was 10 was something that I was told. It wasn't something that I experienced. And when I was there, it became very real. And I thought I was honored that you were there to help me capture that.
So it was interesting, because being an outsider, kind of looking into your story, with the cameras, is the house it felt like a normal old house to me. And it, opening that door for you felt like 1,000 pounds. And for me, it was all pretty, it seemed pretty normal, but it was interesting to observe your reaction inside of that space, knowing what had happened there, and speaking with the current owner of the home, who was really kind and just kind of opened his door to us and let us come in and answered questions for us about what he knew, and just meeting all these people and kind of seeing their reactions. It's been a really, really cool story to dive into. For me, just outside looking in, and I'm really excited to see how the real story unfolds. I kind of just did the top level snapshot, and the podcast will be the medium that really dives in and really, kind of investigates, and then, finding out what we learned about familial DNA, and knowing that, hey, this case could really get a break if some things changed, and being able to talk about that. So I'm excited to see how you guys kind of tell this story, and I'm excited that even now, just a little bit of time we spent, kind of know that, hey, there's something we can do to help to maybe get some justice.
Yeah, because I think that I've talked about this in our pre-production diaries, and we've talked about this before, that my intent with these diaries is to sort of take the shine off of what feels like, oftentimes when you listen to podcasts, it feels so produced and so intentional. And I wanted to show that we're figuring it out as we go. And one of the things that I'm trying to walk the line of is being very, very sensitive to an ongoing investigation, while at the same time trying to tell a story that people can actually care about. Yeah. I know that that's what you do for a living, trying to figure out I think you've said to me is, how are you going to elicit change in your viewer? Talk to me just a little bit about that, and specifically sort of to what we're doing here.
I know we've talked about just in filmmaking process. I always tell people that in order to tell a story, I only need to know two things. Who is my audience, and what behavior am I trying to change? And if I know those two things, I can usually begin to figure out what the story needs to be. And so I guess just kind of meeting all the people that we met was really, really, it was really, really cool, because even though this story is nearly 30 years old, it was still like it happened yesterday. There are people who have not talked about these ladies in years, And when we asked the questions, you could just see, how fresh some of these wounds still are for this. So being able to, I don't know, and the people that we met and kind of what we learned about the case, and a lot of the things that we learned are not, were not in the trailer. Some of that, just very strategically. There were times that we even shut the cameras off to talk about certain things, because it's always a line. You want to tell the story, you want to represent everybody correctly, but I remember the thing that you kept telling me is, we do not want to, we don't want to sensationalize any of this, and that was easier for me to be respectful of because, it's your story. But I just remember the moments when we were shutting off the cameras and the recorders to have kind of off the record conversations so we could understand as storytellers, but sparing some details and things from the viewers that are, really, just dark, and and really they don't make the story any better. So it was, it was interesting to get that glimpse into it, and then also kind of decide how to best tell this story in a way that represents everybody, in a way that's positive, but still tells the story.
Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about that.
What I guess I would love to hear from you. I live in this every day. You go on with your life, and we touch base pretty often about it. But as you've just sort of spent some time away from it, what is your hope for this story, this podcast, this effort? As personally, what would you like to see come from what we're doing here?
As a filmmaker, my intentions for anything are always the same, is that I just want the story to find an audience. There's no shortage of stories in the world. There's this, the value is audience, and I would like for people to hear, this story, not because, the thing is, for both of us is, this isn't like a career move. We both have day jobs. This will probably be the first and last podcast I'm ever a part of from the storytelling side of, because, I make movies, you work in the music industry and you help make artists and do that. So I really want this to find an audience, but not so the podcast gets famous, but because I think if more people could hear the story and learn what I learned in a week in Starksville with you, then people can really get involved to help change some things that can actually help solve some crimes, not just in Starksville, but what we're learning about some of the limitations in law enforcement with DNA and criminal cases. I think if we can move the needle on some legislation and people can understand that there's some things in place that are maybe keeping crimes unsolved, then I think that's the hope.
Yeah.
Is that it affects change. Like I said, I don't think anybody's looking to get podcast famous. I don't even know if that's a thing.
I don't think so. I don't think it is.
For me, I just want to make my films.
Yeah.
But you invited me to be part of this story, and I know we're going to tell it. And my hope is that people will listen.
Yeah.
Because if people listen, they'll know they can get involved, and if they get involved, then maybe a lot of families can find answers and closure to things like this that have been kept away from some of the laws and things that are in place that we're going to learn a lot more about in the podcast.
Yeah, spoiler alert, I guess, is sort of after that trip to Starkville, we knew how we could help. And I think that a lot of true crime podcasts, it's whodunit, let's go and throw some mud around and make some accusations and see if we can stir stuff up so that we can, smoke out a killer. I think that's reckless. I think that I have no business. I'm not an investigator. I don't work for law enforcement. But what I do believe that I'm good at, and I think that we share some of these talents, is telling a compelling story that elicits change in its viewers, in your case, and its listeners in my case.
Yeah.
And if we can do that as an effort of this side project,
Right.
I think that there is good to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the only reason I'm doing it.
Yeah, no, this is, like you said, when a week on the road, we figured out, we figured out how we could help. And I think we were even talking about this, is, really a week on the road, we're not really sure maybe not sure what episode 1 looks like, but got a pretty good idea of what the last one does.
Yeah.
So, and that was kind of interesting to really know that, hey, there's something we can do to get involved to help get some answers.
Thanks to Jason Adams for taking the time to sit down and chat. If you want to learn more about his work, check out adamsfilm.com. Special thanks to the Knock Knock team, Chris and Lacey from Swell Story Media, Rebecca Jones, Jason Adams, Simon Jones, Cole Flynn, and Colleen Jones. Your time and sacrifice means the world to me. Please be sure and connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Knock Knock Pod. There you can ask me questions, leave your comments, or just say hi. Also, make sure and share our website, knockknockpodcast.com, with your friends and family. Full episodes will launch in September, and we'll be back next week with a new pre-production diary entry. Thanks again for subscribing to the Knock Knock Podcast.